Welcome to Broadway Corner with Ashley Ha, where you can hear your favorite performers talk about how they got started, their careers, and everything in between. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Spotify at Broadway Corner with Ashley Ha, and on my main Broadway account at Broadway_Corner on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy.
Well, we are so excited to be talking to Ashley Ha. Ashley is an MTCA class of 2023 student. She's currently attending Boston Conservatory MT for the class of 2027. And Ashley is a fellow podcaster, YouTuber, content creator. She created Broadway Corner, which is like a podcast and YouTube channel, which dives into her Broadway interests. She's had a lot of the leads of like Here Lies Love, K-pop, Little Shop of Horrors, and others on the show. I think Ashley's also a proud Taiwanese American, and I'm going to say very proud Broadway fan. And we're going to talk a little bit about both representation and your proud fandom on the show today. But first off, Ashley, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm so great. So great to talk to you. It's been what seems like forever since I've seen you at all.
It's been a year, right? It's been almost exactly a year. I think it was last LA Unified. Yeah. And we talked about doing this. And for those who are hearing my voice and like, who is this human being? We're doing something a little fun here, like we've done with Carrie Butler and Jimmy Nicholas on our pod, and I know you've done this before, that we are both fellow podcasters, so we're going to do this home and home style. So if you're a regular listener of Mapping the College Audition, this is going to sound normal to us. You're going to hear the first half of this conversation from me as the guest host perspective, or I'll be the host, and then we're going to switch roles. So if you're a Broadway Corner listener, it's going to sound like the reverse, but then who's this weird guy talking? And then, of course, it'll make sense a little bit as you hear Ashley lead. But I think it'll be fun. You tell me. I think it'll be fun for your listeners to hear you chat about your journey a bit more in depth. I'm not sure how much you've done that on your own show. And then I, of course, have a few topics I want to dive into. But I think, for our listeners, I'll say especially, we try to have as much diversity as possible on the podcast. And one of the hardest places to have diversity is in age, because we tend to have guests on who have pretty long resumes, which of course you don't yet have a very long resume, but it's often difficult when we talk about the college process, and we're going to dive into the college process, to sort of talk about it as it is now with a guest who's gone through it 10, 15, 20 years ago. I sometimes hear my audience eye rolling as they're like, I did 5 whole schools, I did 7 schools or whatever, when they're, they did the process 20 years ago. It's totally different. But you, of course, just went through it. And so I want to talk about you going through it, your BoCo experience, and as much as you feel comfortable talking about both. I know you're still really in the middle of it. Okay, so can you take me back? Let's start off. Can you take me back a whole year ago, maybe even 2-ish years ago, as you're kind of starting this process in earnest, and tell me, like, what was your mindset? I'd like to first hear, like, in terms of like what you were looking for in a school and how you were trying to approach the process. Did you have like a mission statement? This is how I'm going to shoot for. Here are my must-haves in a school. What were you thinking about as you first started approaching like a college list?
Yeah, well, you say a year ago. I remember obviously getting ready for, I think, Unifieds at this point. But then you go 2 years ago. I don't think I was thinking about it at all.
So you started the process more like as a senior, like summer senior year. When did you start diving in?
Yeah, I think it was like the May of junior year. I was about to go on summer break. And then I also had the NYU summer Tisch summer program that I was doing, which like, again, that was a solidifying factor in me actually applying and pursuing this. But I think like MTCA, I did like a consultation in that May, and then I just kind of didn't think about it until the fall. And then I was just like, okay, I don't really know what this is about, what this is like. I don't have any family members who are in really, like some of my cousins, like they were going to do it, but then switched majors to film or did different things like that, or switched to art. And so I didn't really have anyone to go off of for me personally. And so MTCA was kind of like everything in terms of just learning what I even wanted at a school. I mean, I didn't really have the whole like, oh, this was my dream since I was 5. It was like, oh, it's just a dream since I've had maybe like a couple months ago, because I really like, I've always loved this. But I think I didn't quite know what the process even was at that point. Just thinking back, honestly. Yeah.
Totally. Well, for those who are watching the video, we're seeing playbills out the wazoo that seem to extend into the ether of your bedroom. But so you must have been at this point.
They're actually all the way all around here. And
they wrap the whole wall? My God.
Yes, they do.
But so you must have been like already by then a very big Broadway fan. What was it about NYU? So, I mean, it's not all uncommon, I think, that people do a summer program and go, yes, I do want to pursue this in college. Now I know, it sort of locks it in for you if that's what happened. What was it about that experience that made you go, yes, I want to pursue this professionally, as opposed to maybe you already knew you were a Broadway fan, but didn't necessarily know you were going to do this professionally?
Yeah, I think when I went to NYU, I was just like, okay, I've had like zero dance training, a couple years of voice training, barely any acting training. And I'm like, I'm going into this fresh. I don't know what this
Mm-hmm.
experience is going to be at all. I'd never taken dance classes before, really. And just to be in a space where it was like a conservatory style. It's kind of like what I'm doing now, honestly,
Yep.
but at NYU, where 5 days a week, you were going from 10 to 5:30 every single day, doing your dancing, doing your acting, doing singing, vocal performance, different classes like that. And it was just a great experience. I met a lot of amazing people, and it was just like, okay, this seems like it fits. I can handle this kind of coursework, also enjoy my life and go around New York City because you're in New York City.
Yep.
But it was just like that moment of like, okay, I think I can handle this. I don't think I'm as behind as I thought I was.
Yep.
And okay, maybe I am ready for something like this.
Yep. I think not at all uncommon. I mean, that's one of the big values of summer programs is like, if you've never been to Hogwarts, if you don't know what this experience of like doing magic all day, which it really is, even if you have a high school that's, half the day you're spending on the arts, it's still only half the day. And that's the exception of people who have those sort of arts high schools. I mean, to spend all day doing nothing but this, and it's not always completely nothing, but you're at a conservatory program. This is the majority of your day, right? At BoCo, you are doing acting, singing, dancing. Yes. Most of the time. That's what your day is consumed. And then
pretty
in the rehearsal.
Much all the time.
Pretty much all the time. And if you're not used to that, it's weird. It's helpful sometimes to get a little sample of that. But I hope some of our listeners, if they're out there, maybe they're juniors who are just about to start the process and haven't really done so yet. I hope they're kind of gratified to hear, oh, actually didn't have it all figured out even May of her junior year. So you're ahead if it's January of your junior year right now. And that you did so well through the process and that so we'll dive into that. But okay, so take me through now you've finished the summer program and now here you are. You've got MTCA, of course, as a resource, but what are you thinking about in terms of like, all right, now how I do want to approach this process? Did you know I really want conservatories? Did you know, hey, I do still want some more liberal art BFA programs? Were you looking at audition-based BAs? How did you sort of approach like your list with how many schools you applied to? And, I just love to hear a number that's more than 7 or 8, because that's what so many students say they applied to, or so many of our guests. So like, what did you end up applying to in terms of the way you approched it?
Don't tell me 7. I ended up doing 14, which is small for what people do now. I have to say, where you were hearing other people maybe doing 20 or 30 or something like that. And I was like, okay, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I need to do that. But they were all BFA programs that I auditioned for, all audition based. And half of them were liberal arts, some of them were conservatory. Like, I kind of had a lot of a mix there. And I know NYU too, that's like even in the academic coursework, it's like half and half. So it's like I wasn't limiting myself to only one thing. I don't know if I exactly knew what I wanted at that point. I was just kind of feeling it out and really thinking about, okay, where would I actually go to school instead of what are the 10 other schools I might be able to audition for? It was like, okay, where would I go if I was accepted? And I knew I wanted to be East Coast. I wanted to be like in the North, like New York State or, Connecticut or Boston or New Jersey or something like that. So I really only auditioned for schools that I knew I would maybe go to if I was accepted. And also 4 of those were walk-ins. So I didn't know I was going to do 4 of those. So at first my list was 10 and that was it. And so I felt like, oh, maybe I need to grab onto a couple more. And as the process went on, I was like, okay, I think I'm all right with where I am. And it all turns out okay. It's like you don't need to do 30. I heard one time 50. I was like, that is too much for me. I can't.
50. 50 is like a magical unicorn number. I do feel like people always just remember and repeat the highest number that they hear. It was not that long ago when people would say, someone's doing 20 schools is crazy, right? And 20, of course, is a lot. Though I think now no longer crazy. I think it's definitely people do 20, 25 schools. But then it's quickly people go 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Like no one's doing 40 schools. I mean, not no one. There are people in the world who do it. But that is not of course, necessary. There is some diminishing returns if you're talking about I'm doing 40 or God forbid 50 schools. I had a student once say, I'm going to do 50. She did not end up doing 50. 50 is, that is a lot of work.
Attempting to do 50.
But at some point, I'm also like, what kind of competition are you trying to win? You can only go to one school. So are you trying to get 19 acceptances? Like we like more acceptances, we like more options, but at some point, of course, they're diminishing returns. But I love that you approached it that way. I think that makes a lot of sense. And of course, could have been a little bit guided by us too, in terms of the less sure you are about, I know I want BFA conservatory with this much academics, the more broad it's going to be. But then of course, if you know stuff like, I know I have a geographic limitation, I don't want to go to school in Texas or go to school in Florida, then you're going to apply to those schools. That makes a lot of sense. What made you want definitely New York City? Because you're from the West Coast, true?
I am. I'm in California. I'm about 2 hours from LA. And my grandparents live in, around LA. So I'm used to this coast and definitely used to the weather. Like right now it's our cold and it's like, I don't know how many degrees, but it is warm compared to where Boston is right now, which is scary. But I have since I think 2017, that was like my first time going to New York ever. And then we just kept going back. I think because of my passion for the arts and for Broadway, because I didn't really start 2017 was my first Broadway show. That was it wasn't my entire life, and I wasn't a fan my entire life. 2017 was probably when it started, even just liking Broadway, even though that was maybe 7 years ago. But it was that was my place now, where I could be and have fun and just be myself more, and go to a stage door and meet people that were really kind and just get to have that energy that I didn't get when I was here. And just be happy in and around New York City. I mean, I went right before I came back home, and I just, every single time I'm like, there's so many things you can do and so much adventure that you can do. You don't even have to see Broadway show. You could go see a show at Green Room. If you get a last minute ticket, it's super affordable, and see great performances. It's there's really no limitation to what you can do. And so I just really fell in love with being in the city, and then studying in the city just made it 10 times better, because I was like, okay, I can do classes in the day and then at night go to a free show through NYU, go see Hadestown with a lot of the original cast, and just be there next to people who also love it just as much as I do. And so I think, if you're in New York every single day and trying to fill up your days, that's a little hard. But when you have half the day is filled with classes, and then after that you enjoy your day, it's that was kind of just the perfect feel for me when I was there. And obviously that's not exactly where I am right now, but it's it gave me just an idea of who I could be.
So cool. And tell me, you mentioned a little bit your grandparents. Tell me about your relationship with your family through this process. You said this is not something where you're like, oh, my family was all doing this. We all are artists. Though I know your mom is also an artist. I got to get to know your amazing mom a little bit. Talk to me about how were they in terms of, were they supportive of this process from the beginning? How did they support you? And I'd love to, maybe because we have a lot of parent listeners, what do you think worked well for you in your relationship with that support? And any advice you'd give to parents about what to do the same or what to do different? If you go, hey, when you're supporting a kid in the arts, it's really helpful to do this or that. Any advice to those parents out there?
Yeah, I mean, my parents were both so supportive of me. Could not have been more supportive, really. Just both personally and also in a way financially. That's kind of a struggle that some people, have, or maybe their parents don't want to support them in that way. But I was blessed enough to have that. And it was just kind of okay, you want to do this? You're going to do this now. We're going to work with MTCA because we don't know what the process is like. Yep. We don't know exactly what we're doing. We're not just going to go in blind. We need some help here. And so to just have that support, it was so to me, I'm used to that because they're my parents, and that's just what our relationship is like. But then to think of maybe what could have been in a different universe. I mean, to call out the obvious, I am Asian. A lot of Asian parents don't support the arts or don't want you to be an actor, would think that's ridiculous. And my dad is a doctor and his family's doctors. I could have gone down that path, but instead they're supporting me to go down a different path that I actually am very passionate about. And it's kind of one in maybe 100 or whatever, where you get this kind of support from family. Yeah. And so my mom was there with me at Unifieds, and like my dad was looking over my college applications and helping both my parents write too. So they were both helping me with the essays and endless things that I felt like I had to do. And so just to have them just be there for me. And even at Unifieds, if I didn't want to talk, like I would just, just stay in my head and just kind of prepare. Like my mom would give me that space. And so I guess to parents, it's like, just if you can support your child as much as you can, it really helps. Because if they feel like you want it, they want it for you as well. It's like, instead of pushing against something so much, if you just let it be something you can do together, it is such a better journey, I think, than it would have been to not have as supportive parents. It would have been a lot more difficult, where, with me and my mom, we made it a whole little trip to go to LA for Unifieds. Like it was such a fun experience.
Do you remember anything specific about Unified? I mean, because as they listen to this, it's going to be right after New York City Unifieds, if I remember that, when we're releasing this correctly, and right before Chicago. So they're right going to be in that middle of that thrust. Do you remember something specific that you and your mom did, or something that you really appreciated in terms of the way your mom supported you at New York City? I mean, at LA Unifieds, this was where you were. Did you Chicago too? No, just LA.
No, just LA.
So what did work? What did you like about what your mom did?
Yeah, I think like on the way there, it was just us two in the car, like just driving there together. And we listened. I'm a big Blackpink fan, the K-pop group Blackpink. Like giant fan now. And so we just we love the song so much. And so we just listened to it, sang along together. I was like, maybe I should save my voice, but maybe not. I was like, it's okay.
It's warming up. You're warming yourself up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was warming myself up. And so it was just like pure joy, just all the way down, and like enjoying ourselves. Got checked into the hotel, like just relaxed for a little bit. And I think because there was a different hotel where Pace was doing auditions, so that was where we went first. And then I did that. And then afterwards, like we went and got sushi, which is like my favorite food. So it was like, you do an audition, and then like, I know that's a big thing, is like a little bit of a reward sometimes afterward. It's just like, you want to really appreciate yourself for doing that for you, of just being like, okay, I did this, and celebrate that. And so we had like a good night. And then like the day after, I think, was when we went to the other hotel for actual Unifieds and like checked in. But overall, it was nice just being there with my mom and knowing that she loves and supports me so much. And just like that she was there even for me, and was there to be at all my auditions and help me get some of them too.
Well, but help you get some of the walk-ins too. Yeah. I mean, I do think that's where we talk a lot about like sort of psychological prep, and how it's kind of the unattended to sometimes warm up part of it, of going, are you putting yourself in a psychological place to bring your joy into the room, to want to bring that work into the room? And if for you, 2 hours of K-pop is like, that's going to put me in a great place, and then I walk into that room feeling joyful. There's a big difference between that and you having stressful conversations with your mom in the car going, okay, now don't forget this. Now, what are you going to do about that? And you're like, okay, I have to like go do this audition now. Was there something in this process that kind of surprised you? Was there anything that you go, well, now that I've gone through it all, I know, again, it's a year ago for you to remember this back, but is there anything that after going through it all, you go, oh, if I did it again, now I would do this differently. Now I understand something different about this process.
I remember when we talked a year ago saying that I would have started earlier. That's something I remember that I said. But I'm like, now I don't really know if I would have said the same thing, because I think I started in a really good place. Like, it definitely helps to start as a junior and to get that training in before, it gets really busy. But for me, like my senior year was chill, and I was able to really just focus on what I needed and what I wanted to do. And so I could do coaching at 8 a.m. in the morning because I am on a different coast. But just being like, okay, now I'm at peace with where I was at that point. At the time, I was like, oh, I'm so behind. There's no way I'm going to get through this. But then I did, and it was totally fine. It's like, you just go in there and just be yourself and not even like think too much about it. It's just kind of like, I don't know. I don't even know what to say anymore. I'm just like, you go through it and then you're on the other side. It's like, there's really no way I could have made it any easier or more difficult. Like, it wasn't like that. It was just like, okay, we're done now.
Yeah.
And then this is the outcome. It's like you work hard, you put in that time, and then it's like it'll work itself out in the end. So it's like I honestly don't know if there's anything I would have done differently, because I think if I did do something differently, I might have stressed myself out even more. So it's like I'm okay with that, where some days I would just be like, okay, I don't want to work on anything at all today. And then other days I'm like, okay, got this coaching and gotta do this and do this application and this pre-screen. It's like you just have to know yourself, I think.
Yep. We talk about it a lot in life, just like your timing is your timing. Something Liz and I talk about sometimes in terms of like when we met each other and when we were ready for things. And so often it's like you started when you were ready, when you actually were ready. Like some people, people are so funny with timing in this process. We just had met a junior in January who was like, I'm so late. I was like, you're not so late. Let's be clear. It's I understand it's an overwhelming process. You feel behind, but you're not so late. I mean, May of your junior year is a very normal time for us to meet people. We meet people into the fall of their senior year. And then of course, there's more work to do in a shorter bit of time if we meet you then, but your timing is your timing. And then you work at a different pace. Someone who starts as a fall of junior year just has a little more luxurious timing as opposed to being like, okay, this is what these months are. But if you didn't know until you did NYU that you were totally ready to do this, what good would it have been to be like training for something that you didn't necessarily know you wanted to do? So
no, definitely. And I mean, I did do Broadway Evolved with Betsy Wolf like back in 2021. That was like the first time I'd gone back
from
to
the
New York.
podcast. We're not advertising other people. No, I'm just kidding. Keep going.
No, that was like the first time I went back to New York since the pandemic. And that was like another place where there were like interns that were in musical theater programs and stuff. And I was like, what's going on? I have no idea what is happening right now. And then I like didn't think about it for a while. So it's like you will hear about A1s. I don't even really know what's happening anymore. Unified. So it's like, okay, I'll figure that out later. And it's like it's okay to not always know exactly what's going on, because I know I didn't. I definitely didn't.
And everyone seems more in the know. The same way that you remember the person who said they did 30, you're like, should I have done 30? You remember the person who's like super nerd about it and knows everything. And you go, I guess everybody knows that. It's like, no, they don't. Most people don't know what they're doing when they're starting this process, of course. Do you remember how you narrowed down your final options? Like, if you really felt I didn't know anything in terms of I was beginning my school list, what did you use sort of to determine, hey, BoCo feels like the right fit for me based on what your options were?
Yeah, I mean, when I got all of my decisions back and stuff, I was like, okay, narrowing it down by maybe like location or program and just like where I wanted to be. And then when I thought about BoCo, I was like, okay, first of all, school has a great reputation, great like people that I've talked to from it as well. I got to go visit and talk to some of the previous MTCA student, Annie McCarthy, and just like talk to her about her experience and a little bit about that. And when I thought about what the actual program was, there was a lot of dance, like not like overwhelming dance, but like every day you're dancing and you're doing this, and it's like it's conservatory. You're only doing like one one liberal arts course at Berkeley a semester so far for me, of just like you are really just focusing on what you want to do, and just doing that. You're doing your acting classes and doing music lab. You take piano. I thought that was really fun too, to just like, I'd done piano in the past, but just to get back into it and like get that musicality and do music lab and all of those different classes that are really essential to being an artist. When I looked at it, I was like, okay, this is the right choice for me. And maybe it'll be better if I'm not in New York, because then I'm not distracted as much anymore. I think I was talking to Leo about this too, and you, of just, okay, do I really want to be in New York right now? Where it's like,
given how strong a pull it is for you specifically, where you're like, do I have to see a Broadway show every night? Like, is it gonna be hard not to be rushing instead of going to class?
It's like, is this right for me at this time? Where, okay, if I end up moving to New York after college, I'm gonna have the rest of my life there. So it's okay if I take a little bit of a pit stop and just go to Boston, where it's only 4 hours from the city too. I took a couple trips during this past semester with some friends to just like catch a show or do something fun. And it's like there is accessibility in being in Boston, where it is a big city as well. So it's like it just felt like the right place for me at the time. And it still is.
I love it. Yeah, you like felt it, but surprise announcement, I'm leaving. I'm like, no, anything we didn't touch on in the college process you want to hit on? Anything like maybe that you learned from the wonderful MTCA? Any particular helpful feedback? Anything you were like, I really love that I did this, or I really feel good about that, other than, of course, listening to this podcast. What a resource. But anything that you felt like that you just wanted to say about your college process before we jump into some other things?
Yeah, I think what I wanted to say is that Unifieds, having you and Leo there was like the best part of it, because it's like you have a little space to wind down and just chill and chat and eat bagels or something, or even do your warm-ups in the morning like I did those, and just to have someone there to support you who knows exactly what's going on in this process, or and just knowing that you did that for every single Unifieds as well. And I mean, you're going to, I'm sure, just like going to these different places.
Well, now that you promised it, Ashley, I guess we are going to do it. Of course, we'll do it this year as well.
Yeah, no, but just to have that resource there the whole time, and for me and my mom, just to be able to just go and sit and not have to think about as much stuff as if we were in the hallways with all the people all the time. It was just like a really nice kind of area to chill out a little bit. And so I appreciated that.
Thank you. Okay, so talk to me about school a little bit. So of course, recognizing this is just your experience, you don't have to speak for all BoCo experiences, right? And also recognizing this is a difficult moment to be slicing in just at the beginning of your training experience. So you're in it right now. And sometimes it's hard to find that 1,000-foot view as you're kind of in the muddle of it. But what has the beginning of your college experience, how does it match up based on what you kind of thought it would be when you visited? I both want to hear of the educational part of it. I also want to hear like the college part of it. I think a lot of young people, I'm surprised now more and more, are like, I'm not totally sure what college is more socially and that kind of stuff too. So I guess, how has your experience been? What has it been like your first year at BoCo?
Yeah, I think at BoCo, oh my gosh, now you have to think of the fall. It was such a crazy, like, first week of orientation. You're like, what's going on? You had to do like a dance placement for your dance classes. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not really, like, I'm a mover. I'm not super experienced. It's like, at first I was really, really freaked out. And then we started, and then everything got relaxed. And you get a cohort, since BoCo's class is bigger, you get like a little cohort of like 12 people. And so that's kind of your people you're moving with all the time. And then like you get your dance classes where that's not based on cohort, it's based on levels. And so being like, okay, I'm in the perfect one I should be in right now. Like everyone's in the same boat as me. And yeah, just starting out, like, it's hard. Like, it's really, really hard. Like, every single day I have 4 or 5 classes usually every single day, except for like Fridays, which is like your chill day. But it's like you're doing a lot, and sometimes you don't get out until like 7 at night, and then you're just like so tired you don't even want to do anything else after that. And then there's like, you have to do a tech assignment, which was a big thing for me too, and where it's like a week of your life you have to be there every day till like 11 o'clock. And it's just like, it's a crazy schedule, but I think I've been navigating it pretty well. I'm usually a pretty resilient person in terms that I can just like adapt to where I am. I'm like, if you need me to do this thing, I'll do that thing, and I'll figure it out. But it's like, yeah, college is a lot. And especially being in a BFA program, it's a lot. And talking to people who go to maybe Berkeley, where it's a little bit, so right now, their course load is less than us. Like, some of them only have 1 class a day. And you're just talking to them being like, oh my gosh, like, we are doing so much. And being like, but that's what we signed up for. And that's okay. Like, I wouldn't have it a different way, where I feel like it gives you just enough space to like breathe, but then also you're doing classes that, just intensive training that I wanted.
Are you finding any time socially? So, I mean, you don't admit this in case your mom's listening to the podcast, but are we doing partying? Are we doing, like, do you feel like, I guess, what is the college experience? I don't think people always understand the conservatory experience. And I could say that either way, not to say that you are or you aren't, but what is that experience sort of socially in terms of how you're able to branch out from outside of just the musical theater people that you know? Like, how are you finding that kind of other non-educational college experience, I guess I'll say?
Yeah, I mean, Myself, I am not a partier. I am a very chill person when it comes to that. It gets a little bit overwhelming and that's totally fine. But for me,
Hmm.
I'd much rather, grab a friend and go try some new food in Chinatown or in Alston where there's a lot of, again, great food. That's another one of my passions is food. Um, and just to be like, okay, let's go do something fun. Or like my friend's a violin major. It's like, don't just interact with your
Uh-huh.
major. It's like, make sure you're trying to interact with other people. And I have one friend, Angelina, where we both live in the same building, so a lot of times we'll just hang out together either in each other's rooms or just in the common room,
Hmm.
but just like we'll just spend time together. And that's like, I think the best thing for me to do is just like to actually get to know people instead of just like getting really really overstimulated or overwhelmed or feeling like I have to do that, because I
Uh-huh.
definitely don't think you have to. There's a lot of people in my class who do that, and I know they do that, and it's like you can see it, and it's like they love it, and I'm like, good for you, but that's
Yep.
not exactly who I am as a person, and that's totally fine. It's like we have different experiences, and I think a lot of people too maybe in college or like in our generation are also figuring that out, of being like, okay, we can just relax a little bit and
Uh-huh.
just be chill.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yep. Okay, can we talk about your fandom a bit? Because I have to say, this is one of my favorite things about you. It's one of the reasons I was like, I have to have Ashley on the pod. I think it's really a cool perspective because I see it on social media. Is this like unabashed and unapologetic fandom? And I think it's really relatable to a lot of people. And I think surprisingly uncommon in people who are pursuing this at a professional level. Like a lot of people try to be kind of cool about it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't need to like pretend like I'm a huge fan of this. And I'm like, you are. This is why you got into musical theater. Was that
No, I
performer? What is
talk
wrong with
I
you? You
talk
know?
about that a lot. I'm like,
Yes.
guys, we are not as cool as we try to
Yes.
be. Like, we're all nerds and we know that. But
Right.
I think they try to hide it. I'm like, no, you
At some
have to
point, you
accept
had to have
it.
been a nerd. At some point, when you were
Yeah.
like, I want to do this, I see myself up there. Someone made you do that. But so I guess, have you consciously thought about this, especially now, maybe thinking a little bit as a content creator and just how, because you started content creating, it seems, before you knew for sure you were going to be a musical theater
Oh yeah.
performer.
Well,
And
I
how,
actually started content creation before I ever started singing or
uh-huh.
doing anything. Like I was maybe
Yep.
a fan in 6th grade or so, 6th or 7th grade, and then I started singing in high school. So it's like I
Uh-huh.
was not a performer from when I was younger.
But so how do you merge those two things? And especially as you think about like, well, eventually I'll be 22 and I'm graduating into the world and I'm going to be auditioning and stuff. How do you see the sort of your public fandom, your Broadway corner of it all, which it really is feels like you're leading from a kind of fan place. How do you see that merging into sort of your own professional life?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've done in terms of like making a podcast and just doing that side of it instead of just being like a Broadway content creator and just posting photos and videos and things, where I get to talk to people who are in Broadway shows and doing the thing, or even other Broadway content creators. I think it brings it to such a personal level of just like getting to know people as people.
Hmm.
And it's allowed me to just connect with so many people. The cast of K-pop, like that was a big thing for me, where I was really trying at the end to help them out and try to help extend the show. But then I
Yep.
got to just get to know them afterward, and I still talk to a few of them a little bit,
Hmm.
of just like keeping up with what they're doing, and knowing them as people, and not using this and the resources that maybe I do have through being like a content creator as just
Yep.
like networking. It's like just talking and making friends maybe.
Yep.
And they don't have to be your best friends. It's like maybe someone that if you go see their show, they'll say hi to you after.
Yep.
And then just doing Broadway Corner, it's like, okay, it's becoming something more important than just Broadway. It's like it's becoming more personal to myself, where when I started doing Broadway Corner, I was posting about like just cast members and mean girls and fun
Uh-huh.
things like that, where it was not as much about representation and about
Uh-huh.
being Asian and being people of color just in this industry and in America, as it is now. It really took a shift, especially I think as I got older through the pandemic. That was a big
Uh-huh.
factor for me. And just realizing that it's a lot more important than it used to be to me now to really talk about these kinds of things. And make that a part of who I am. And being a performer who also does that, it's like, it's a little different. It's not many people who are my age maybe have a podcast as they're in a BFA program.
Yep.
And as they're studying to be an actor, it's like you either be an actor or you be a content creator, and you be a fan, or you be a podcaster. It's like I've kind of found some way to mix them all together, and just I don't even know what I would be without each of those different aspects, where it's like I love doing content creation for Broadway, but I love podcasting. And then I like being an actor. But then also I like content creating that has nothing to do with Broadway. It's like there's so many different avenues that I feel like I have right now that I just love pursuing. It's like I have so many things I want to do and not enough time to do it.
So cool. It's so cool. Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about representation, because you know, I know some of the big ones that you both became a fan and an advocate of. You K-pop, you mentioned Here Lies Love. I mean, actually, I'm gonna tell you, you're the reason I saw Here Lies Love is because I saw a post and I was like, it's closing when? Oh crap, I gotta go see it the next week. And I saw it like that Thanksgiving week or before. Yeah. I was like, I didn't even realize it was closing. But like, you know, what does that mean to you, sort of in terms of your feeling of representation and sort of seeing yourself represented on a Broadway stage? What made that sort of so personal to you and something that you're gonna you know, be an advocate for?
Yeah, I think to me, representation really just does mean everything. It means everything in every aspect of my life, where I'm realizing things about myself when I was younger that I didn't realize were hurtful, maybe. You know, different things at lunch, or just being one of the only Asian kids at my school. And just talking to people who have that same exact experience as me, it's like it's healing. And to just have the ability to talk to these actors, who most of them in Here Lies Love and K-pop, where a lot of them were making their Broadway debuts, and a lot of them were really young. Some of them were just finishing their BFA program. One of the people, I'm actually interviewing him tomorrow, Nathan Angelo, he just finished his last semester at Montclair, but he was also on Broadway at the exact same time. And he's a young Filipino artist. And just to have like space to talk about who we are and what these shows mean to us in different ways is really, it's just so special. I mean, for Here Lies Love, I'm so glad you got to see it. Did you do the floor? I don't think I don't think you said it.
Only because I wanted to. Both Elizabeth and I wanted to, but I came with my parents, and I was like, I don't think they're gonna want to do the floor. For those who don't know, there's like you have different levels and places you can watch it. We did the side. I forget what that was called.
Oh, the gallery. Yeah,
the gallery.
The gallery.
Which is a great way to take the show in.
And that's one that I never got to do.
You never did gallery? No. I danced a little. You can be on the floor and like dancing as part of the thing. I danced a little from the gallery, so you know we got off the chair at least.
Yeah. No, I loved that show. But like I grew up with so many Filipino people in Bakersfield, where we went to what's called a Filipino debut the other day, which is like it's the quinceañera for Filipino people, pretty much, of when you turn 18. But it's like that's all around me, and then to see that in a Broadway show and to see people that it's like I know you. It's like it's just that feeling of connection, where it's like these stories that you've never heard of before, and you've never heard this history before because it was never taught to us. Or to have a Korean story in K-pop and just see people from Korea come here to be on Broadway for the first time and get to share their gifts, because K-pop performers are absolutely insane in just what they can do. It's amazing, and I've become such a big fan because of that show. But it's just like seeing yourself on stage and on screen and really in everything. Conrad Ricamora said this, and I use this all the time, where he said, like, representation means to me that when you see yourself, you feel like you belong. And both of those shows in these past couple of years have done that for me, and it just makes me feel inspired to do that for other people when I'm older, or when I'm even now, like, hopefully other people can be like, oh, this Asian girl likes theater. Like, that's not normal. That doesn't happen all the time. And be like, oh, okay, I can like this too. Or I can want to pursue musical theater as well, where it's like, I'm the only full East Asian person in my entire musical theater class, and there's 67 of us. And that's a little bit shocking, and is a little bit of maybe something we have to address eventually. Of just being like, who has the access to these shows, to these programs, and what can we really do about it to broaden the horizons of who's going to be able to go?
It's so well said. I mean, I just experienced that a little more personally with How to Dance in Ohio, which I saw last week. And, you know, my family members on the spectrum. And of course, I think about so many of our students that, like, you're just so rarely represented in musical theater. It's just like you would not think, oh, I'm an autistic actor. There's 6 roles I can step into and play tomorrow. And then all of a sudden you see a show and you go, oh my God, I can play all those roles. Like that's a very cool thing. And I mean, I think there's many aspects of representation that, but I think Broadway is clearly trying and making an effort to do more and more of, but many aspects, plenty of planes to cover still that have not been covered. Yeah. Okay. Let's wrap with this. Let's nerd out for a second. Just what is your dream 10 years from now? So we're going to vision board you at 29. I'm guessing that would make you 30, something like that. So we're going to be, what roles are we playing? What's happening in your life? What we've graduated, where are we in the world? Are we in New York, right? And then we're going to try to check back in 10 years and see how we did. So what's our full dream? What are we vision boarding here for Ashley
full dream? Let me think, because that's crazy to think about, because 10 years ago I was like 8 years old.
Like, this is over half of my life. You're asking me to jump forward. To me, 10 years feels like nothing. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. But okay,
jumping
great.
forward even more. I think definitely in New York, hopefully still like doing the thing. Hopefully I've been on Broadway or done some sort of national tour or something like that. Hopefully,
and
maybe
what kind of roles? Like, what are you hoping to? What would be like? I hope I play this, even if it's not a role that exists yet. But what kind of roles are you like? Ashley Ha would be so good for this.
Well, definitely ones that haven't existed yet, because I think there's so much to be explored there. But I think in terms of existing roles, it'd be like both Elphaba and Glinda. I'm like, why limit yourself to one?
Love it.
It's like, why limit yourself to one? Be like, just
good
do
for
it.
Wicked that it's still running 10 years from now. Way to go, Wicked!
Yeah.
Really
no, I mean, I'm sure it'll still be running, like just based on how it's lasted this long. Yep. Or like, hopefully, in the next few years, have played Katie in Mean Girls. Like, I just saw the movie, and I was like, I still love this show a lot.
So good. It's so good.
Yeah, and I'm hopefully living in New York. I don't know, married. Who knows about that aspect? Hopefully, have
married.
A cat.
Too young.
I don't know.
Marriage. Ashley, no, you can live your life. Of course, it's your timing. Is your timing. If you're married by then, great.
If it happens, it happens. But I think one of my dreams that is actually real is having a cat in New York.
That is. We're gonna check back and you'll be like, "Well, I got the cat." That's what I got.
Here's the cat right now, and hopefully still podcasting and doing all my stuff. I mean, I just want to. I feel like in my life, I just want to do everything. To be perfectly honest, and whether it be film and TV, I'm like, I don't limit myself to just theater or like theater acting or just doing content creation. It's like there's so much of the world out there just to explore that I'm like, there's no limits to what can happen. And so when you say 10 years, I'm like, who knows what could even happen in the next 2 years. So it's like, I think I just have such big dreams for myself, and I hope that I can make them all come true.
So beautifully said. Okay, let's take a short break and we'll flip roles, shall we?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay. So we don't have to pause, we don't have to whatever, but we'll just like we're going to run it out in our pod. I guess you don't have to for yours. It's up to you how you do that. But that's
I don't know. I don't have any ads for myself.
We don't need to do. It's just because of the BPN of it all. We do ads just so that.
Oh right, yeah,
makes us very official seeming to have.
I know.
Let's talk about go see Spamalot on Broadway or whatever,
which I have not seen.
There you go. But maybe after this you'll see it because you'll see the ads.
My dad was trying to get me to see that one. But I'm like, I don't know. There is like, I just want to go see Gutenberg again.
I know. Well, I'm trying to actually tonight see Here Lies Love. Here We Are.
I got to see that. It was actually very fascinating. Like that's all I could say, as it was fascinating.
It was fascinating. It's a weird show. I read it because Elizabeth auditioned for it, so I was like, it seems very interesting. But it also I need to see it. Like I don't really understand from the page what it's going to look like. So
no, you're going to be surprised.
I believe it. Like
the fact that they're making a cast recording. I'm like, with what?
Huh?
What?
With what?
Oh, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know if people really like listen to this on repeat, but that's fine. You can do that.
It's funny though. Like it never will get like super popular, but there'll be people who just forever weird diehard fans. It's just he's got diehard fans.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, great. So I'll let you bring us back then. I'm not going to even, I'm so used to being like, all right, we're back with blah, blah, but I'm going to let you take it from
okay.
Here.
Sounds good. Hey guys, we're back, and now I have taken the wheel, even though I don't drive yet, but that's fine. But we're talking to Charlie Murphy of MTCA, and just, of all of the different things that he does. And yeah, Charlie, let's talk about you now.
Ash,
because
it's
I've
so
never
gentle. You're so
really.
gentle with the way, like, do you see how I'm grabbing it with the wheel with a grip? You're just a gentle guidance. It's a very, that's so kind, and I'm taking notes and taking lessons from watching. Hey guys, I
Thank
like that.
you. But I know I've never really talked to you about you as an actor, but
Hmm.
like I always ask this to different people, but like what was your background? Where'd you grow up? And like when did you discover theater? Because for me, we already know it was late.
Hmm.
But for you, what was it like a lifetime thing? Like what happened that you were like, okay, theater, we have to do that?
It's so funny. I mean, you talk about timing. I'm like, my timing was probably pretty similar to yours. I discovered theater in high school. I loved it in high school. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I grew up in the northern suburbs of Pittsburgh. Um, but I was an athlete. I don't know if I thought I was going to like be a professional baseball player, but I played like, high level high school baseball. And so there was that possibility at least of pursuing it in college. But I think it was about junior year, about that same time that I was like, I think I want this. The only probably big difference between me and you is I had parents, very loving parents who were so supportive, but were not supportive of the arts. They really
Oh
were like,
no.
I was a very academic kid. I did very well in, the SATs and all this kind of, and they were like, you're going to like an Ivy League school. That's what they're both professors like that. We were gonna do that. They would feel like they failed if I didn't go to an academic school. And so I was like, I think I want to maybe pursue this in college, probably around that May, maybe it was a little earlier, like February, March of that junior year. And then, so I really wanted to go to this summer program. I wanted to go to Carnegie Mellon's summer program because I lived in Pittsburgh. It was right there. I was like, this will be a test of can I really do this? And they were like, not a fan of it. They basically were like, well, fine, we'll let you do this if you like pay for it. And they're like, haha, I'll never do it. So then I like waited tables and earned some money. And then they were, by the end, they were like, you only have to pay for half. Now we see how expensive it is. I was like, thank you. That's so nice. And then I did it.
Yeah.
And I had this weird thing where I think even at that point, I wasn't 100% sure that I was going to do it for my life. But then about halfway through the program, I was like, yes, I want to do it. And then I got into the school through that program. So after doing the summer program, I was like, they offered me a spot in it. And I was like, well, now I'm definitely doing this. I'm going to go here. And it's actually how I started coaching, is that basically my senior year of school, all my other friends who wanted to go to college in this, I was like, well, I can help you. I'm not doing anything. I already did my audition. And I would coach my friends. And then I was like, oh, I love coaching. Okay. So I knew from basically 18, 19, not only was I want to be a professional actor, but also I want to be a coach. I love teaching. And weirdly, because my parents were felt I was such a rejection of them by choosing the artistic side of things, but then I ended up also being a teacher, which was exactly what they were. So
hey, that's okay. You fulfilled it both in some way. For me, my dad, when I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. It's just the same. And then did not happen when I realized how hard it was.
You're going to have a cat and take care of the cat. So that's almost as good as being a doctor.
Yeah. But did you do theater when you were in high school, or what was your introduction, I guess, to acting? Because you did go to Carnegie Mellon, not for musical theater, but for acting, right?
Yeah. I mean, I did theater. I did musical theater in high school, mostly as a way to meet women, let's be honest. It's great. No, I mean, I was interested in it for sure. By freshman year, I was like, I like this. This is something that I'm into. And it was then, I liked musical theater more than specifically acting. I think probably the biggest reason I ended up making that switch was I did, and I still think have a beautiful singing voice, but I had, I'm 6'4", for those of you who don't know this on the podcast. And I had a big growth spurt, and my voice changed hugely around sophomore year of school. And I just really struggled with some of the singing. I had just one of those voices where it was it's going to take a couple years before you're going to be able to pursue this as a singer. It was just going to be some finding myself in my body. I was in the middle of playing Marius and Les Mis in our high school. And I went from auditioning and nailing those A's to I cannot hit these notes. I was we need to lower some of these songs. I cannot physically hit. I mean, you can hear I have a very low voice. And that sort of happened all of a sudden my sophomore year of school. So basically from then on, I was still into theater, but I was I didn't trust my voice to be something that I was going to rely on professionally. And that's when I started reading plays. I got really into plays. I still wasn't I'm now super into Shakespeare, but I wasn't particularly into Shakespeare. People often are like, oh, did you know then? That's why you were so into. I was like, no, I think I saw myself in weird, funky off-Broadway plays. I used to love, I would go to Carnegie Mellon's library and just take out all of those plays, these little tiny, I would take out 50 plays at once because they'd let you take out as many as you want.
Oh my gosh.
And I would just fly through them. And, it was I want to, be these weird off-Broadway shows, whatever was there. But I'm that's what I saw myself doing and wanted to do.
Yeah. And I mean, since you said you did just audition, was it at the end of your summer program? Because I know BoCo does the same thing of just like, you just auditioned and then you were just like, okay, I'm done. Was that
Well,
it?
they kind of treat it like, and I think now today they even say it's like, really, it's a mock audition. Do not expect, nobody gets in, which back then it was very few people. I think it ended up being 2 people from my summer program who got in from that audition. It's basically treated like a mock audition. They just give you a chance to like practice all the stuff you've been learning. But then sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they have this little carrot incentive to go, maybe you'll get in, which of course they're dangling to make everybody do the summer program. It's not a high percentage chance, but it ended up being great for me. I mean, it was really thrilling for me. And I also at that program met my best friend who ended up going to Juilliard and just married me. It's awesome dude. So I think similar feeling to you and to many people of like finding community and like locking in, like knowing I already loved this kind of nerdy thing, but then be like, oh, other people like me do too. That these aren't definitely my people. In a way that, like, I think in high school, I think we're often trying on lots of different identities, and I was definitely doing that too. I was like, am I a jock? I don't think I'm a jock, but I kind of fit with the jocks, but I don't feel like them really. But I kind of fit with the theater people, and am I those people? But I don't totally fit with the musical theater people. There'd be times I'm like, I'm not quite that energy, and so kind of figuring out where are my people, who are my people, and it felt like at CMU I was like, yep, these are my people. This is where I belong.
Yeah, because I was gonna think about one of my questions was like, since you helped so many people through their audition experiences, what was yours like? But yours was just like, okay, we're done.
One and
That's
done.
it.
The
And
lame
then
answer
actually
for
that
this.
happened to one of my best friend at BoCo. She did the same thing at end of BoCo, like auditioned and then got in, didn't have to do a single other audition. I was like, excuse me, I did 14.
Excuse me?
Uh,
Yeah. And you're like, I did
oh,
35 over here. Yeah.
yeah, no, and I did every single one of my auditions too. Like I did not cancel a single one.
Yeah.
And so man, that is crazy to hear from you just like that. You're like that's it. We're done here.
It was a really helpful perspective. I mean, it's something I always say when I'm teaching of like, you learn so much by watching other people go through a process. Like I'm sure you experienced that in class too. Like, of course you learn on your feet when you're doing a scene. But you really learn, I think, from watching other classmates when the pressure's off and be like, oh,
Mhm.
I see what they're doing now. Oh, I see this. And I just like watched my friends go through this process pretty, for me, it was low stakes because I'm like, I hope they get into schools. I'm wishing them well. But like watching some of the ways they would twist themselves and torture themselves. And, and I think it's one of the big things MTCA always talks about is like, how do you lead with your authentic self? And like,
Yeah.
I feel like I would watch a lot of friends try to show people something that they thought the schools wanted to see when I'm like, I know my friend, that's not, you can walk in the room and just be you. You don't need to do all that. That was like, okay, cool. I think I have something to say. Back then, I didn't think I was going to be a professional college audition coach. But like when I was then helping people the next year, I was like, I have like 3 things I can really help you with that you
Mhm.
could know going through this is like, you don't need to do all that. You don't need to twist yourself in knots in this way. And like some of those basic things. And then of course, each year you learn a little more and you learn more. And then you really, by the end, feel like, oh God, I know this process.
So then do you remember any of your audition like from at the end of your summer program at all?
Of course. I remember it. I remember every second of it. I got naked in it. I did a monologue where I took my shirt and pants off. I was wearing underwear, but I remember feeling like, boy, I don't know why I made that choice. I think it was like a number of monologues that was presented to me, and I was like, well, I got to choose the riskiest one. That was very much the sort
You
of.
made it. You made a choice and you stuck with it.
I stuck with it. I really did. And then there's like a big moment of like me picking up my clothes and like I think I did that monologue second. So I sort of picked up those clothes and like started walking out of the room or whatever. And it was just like a fun little laugh in the audition of them being like, well, that's funny. Which is not to say everyone out there take off your clothes to get into Carnegie Mellon. That's not the way. I'm not suggesting that. But I remember it just being really fearless. Like I think I had the enough naivete, which I think is something that's really hard with the internet and social media. Like we didn't have it back then, so I didn't
Yeah.
know how hard it was to get into Carnegie Mellon. Really, I didn't know why I shouldn't get in. Like there's so many things that I was kind of naive to, which ended up being really helpful to me. And I just remember a little bit in that hallway being like, oh my God, you're going to get in. Because before I walked in, I was just like, you're going to do this. Like, go do that audition, but like, you're going to get in right now. And like, that was not really a possibility, but I just sort of like believed it and told myself it was true. And then it was true, and then I think I had a lot of that reckless abandon, which I did not have a perfect audition. It wasn't like, oh my God, everything I did was so good, but I think it was really confident. It was really free. And I guess I felt like I remember not knowing enough to limit myself almost. And I remember then learning some of those things, which is you have to learn more technique. But I remember in school being like, oh no, now that I know all this, it's going to be so much harder to like be that free and be that, I think we're as adults often searching for that level of abandon we have at 17, 18, if we have it.
Yeah, I'm surprised you remember all of your audition because I can barely remember any of mine.
Well, I only had one. It's a little easier. They don't blend together when you only do one.
Yeah, I was like, Unified's like, I don't know where I'm going or which one I'm doing now. I'm just going to keep singing the same thing 5 times in a day. Like, like what is going on here? But man, that is such a unique experience of just getting in and then having your entire senior year to kind of help your friends out. Right. And so, okay, when did you meet Leo? And when did you guys become like the dynamic duo that you are now? And then what was the process of becoming the directors of MTCA?
Totally. So I met Ellen first. Ellen was the founder of MTCA, and met Leo through Telly, which Telly is our first podcast guest, our first artist guest on the pod. Leo and Telly are best friends. And Telly, this was very early in the MTCA creation, before it was MTCA, when it was like Ellen was coaching and like she knew I was like kind of interested in doing some monologue stuff while I was still in school. She would like work on their songs. Then she'd be like, you want to help work on their monologues? And she had a couple people who would do that. The wonderful Rin McLemore was one of our first coaches too, still coached to this day. And Telly was. And, this was before there was like dance pre-screen. So we would have people help with dance, but it wasn't quite the level of dance training back then where you had to pick monologues and songs and that kind of stuff. And Telly, I think, worked for us for a couple years. And I'm not going to get the exact year right of exactly when I met Leo, but it was a couple years with Telly. And then I think he was like, who'd be great for this is Leo. And Leo had already been career coaching. He sort of career coach professional actors. And he recommended Leo to Ellen, and they became fast friends and was like, this is total fit. And then, so we met through that. We met, and we were back then sort of like assistant directors of MTCA, kind of to Ellen, who was sort of running it. And this team was still pretty small at this point. But I think we sort of all had our unique skills and the things that we brought to the team, and whether it's different disciplines or different things that we go, I think I'm really good at this and I'm really passionate about this. And, we were all also like working artists. And so it was like something that like you say, you're doing vlogging on the side, you're doing podcasting on the side. It was definitely more on the side at first before it grew into like, hey, this is most of what I do now.
Yeah. No, and I mean, so you guys did you go to school at the same time, you and Leo, or was it
How
like completely
dare you,
different?
Ashley?
I don't know.
I
also did not know your guys'
younger.
age.
Decades younger. I know, this is a sad thing. People feel the same way.
Like, I'm not going to ask, and I don't know.
But
since you guys did go to Carnegie Mellon at the same time.
We did
not at the same time. Both went to Carnegie.
We went to Carnegie Mellon. But Leo's much older than me. Leo's about 40 to 50 years older than me. So it was a very different. No, we didn't overlap. We didn't know each other in school at all. I was
just always thinking about that because I did not know. I'm like, I don't know.
You would sort of think, Leo and I grew up both in the same suburb of Pittsburgh. We went to the same high school, the same college, but we didn't meet each other until after college,
okay.
And through MTCA.
That makes more sense. I was always wondering about that. I was like, because I was reading also on your bio, I was like, Pittsburgh, okay. Like,
you must have been buddies.
How did you not overlap at some point before meeting like everyone else? That's
of course, afterward, have so many of those overlaps. Like we share, like there's this wonderful man who's now passed, but who was a sort of a little brother figure to Leo, who was kind of a big brother figure to me, all went the same high school, but of course didn't know each other at all through that. We only had all these mutual connections and friends that we made later in this process.
Yeah, no, but I think you guys are such a great, team now of just like leading it and being like, going to, like I said, going to the Unifieds and just being there for people, and just like you guys are both so passionate about it, and so it's like a perfect pair.
Thank you. It's it really helps. One thing, we are very different people. I think we have very different skill sets, but we've always been so aligned in our goals of like what MTCA is. Like whenever we'll be like, oh, I think this. It's never about like the philosophy of MTCA or this process or how it works or what we see educationally. I mean, of course, some of that I think helps coming from the same training program and coming from similar backgrounds. That I think it was easier to go, well, from what is the culture of MTCA perspective? It's like locks them since the beginning, which just makes it all easier then to be like, okay, so you're doing this, I'm doing this, but we know we're working toward the same goals. When we say like we have the best interests of students at heart, it's not just that we both have the best interest, but often it is very much the same interest. Like if Leo's talking, I'm like, can be like nodding my head, being like, yep. It's like that. We really do we share, I think, a very similar vision and this very similar idea of kind of what the heart of this program is. And, when it changes and grows over the years, and it has changed so much, the process has changed, we've changed as a company, it's like very helpful to be aligned on those mission statements, on those values, because it lets you change without being like, have we shifted from something that's different than what we both want? And we've been really lucky that that is maintained through adding in pre-screens and, going from 8 schools to 30 schools or whatever the things that you say. And the way that it's changed, the process changed so much, but it's helped us kind of continue to adapt.
Yeah, I think what you said too about like adapting to it is so interesting, because some people, they do it and then they never think about it again. But for you and Leo and all of the coaches, really, you have to think about how it's changing every single year, where I don't know what it was like 5 years ago for people. Maybe it was different, or like I know even before maybe the show Glee was on, like it was much different, and then people got obsessed with it and became more competitive. But it's like you really do have to just see what's changing. It's kind of like how you see how Broadway's changing and how Broadway's adapting to different things or not adapting to different things, of just like monitoring that and then helping people supporting people through the audition process and like what it has become now, which is kind of a lot. Like each person going through the audition experience, like for anyone who doesn't do college auditions, I was talking to someone the other day and she was like, yep, I'm all done with my college application. She's like a senior right now. I was like, that's not done at this
that
point
was not me.
At all. Yeah. I was not done at all. Maybe you were done. You were all done.
Yeah, I was specifically, but not yeah.
But for me, I was like still had unifieds. And I remember, I think I didn't mention this earlier, but like I had strep throat when I did a mock audition online, and then I got sick after unifieds. I was like, there was so much that was going on. I can't even remember half of it, but it's like, it is a lot as a process. And then to have you and Leo and all the coaches just kind of guide you through, you're like, okay, I'm taken care of a little bit more than if I were to just be doing this blind, which sounds so scary to do it without MTCA.
Well, and something
you go ahead.
That's something we think about a lot of, like, you talk about how the process has changed, especially as we are a very large player in this field. I think we're people know about us. We have a strong reputation. I think a lot of people want to work with us. The same way that I talk about schools and the people coming out of school being able to affect and change what Broadway is. So it's like, it's not just that the students have to adapt to Broadway, but they are also graduating and actively changing Broadway. Something we think about a lot of, like, how are we affecting this process? Because we know as we adapt to kind of help our students optimize this process, we're also changing the process. Like it is radically affecting the way that schools, and it's not just us, of course, we're not the only players in this field, but as sort of an industry that is helping students do this, the schools are also reacting to that. And so it's like, it becomes this ever evolving thing. And we're trying to be like, are we influencing it in the right ways? And are we not helping people if we're pushing too hard in this direction? And if we're giving this advice and it gets out there, what if everybody does this? And, those kind of things, which as you have, just with the years of experience and watching it changes, there definitely been times I'm like, oh God, I think that might be in reaction to us. I think that might be because we're telling students what we think is really good advice, and the schools are going, uh-oh, they've caught on to us. And then they're adapting and they're changing.
Yeah. And what is your favorite part of like being, the co-director and just in being a teacher as well? Because I mean, you are so passionate about teaching and helping people out. You're doing like, did it happen already? The like classical monologue.
Yes, that was last night. Yep.
I'm like I don't think I did that last year. I probably should have, but it's like you are doing so many different things all the time, and doing this podcast or doing like I think you're doing the blogging too. Of just like you're doing so much in and around the process. Like, what is your favorite part about it, or what really drew you to it?
Well, I love teaching, I think, and you named exactly what my favorite thing is teaching Shakespeare to young people who don't yet already love it. I also love teaching people who love Shakespeare. I'm like, great, let's nerd out and get to that next level. But I really love, like, something I just love doing as a coach was sort of like, if you go, I hate Shakespeare, I don't get it, just being able to like flick that light on, because I remember that happening to me, and I'm going to sound really cheesy, but it felt magical to me to be like, oh my God, like, there's something about like this dude 400 years ago was writing these things that feel so true. And, they feel true at a level that is like deep in the human experience. And I'm someone who's not particularly religious. I'm agnostic. Neither my parents were very religious. But it feels something like a religious experience to me to be like, oh, I'm connected with the human race and a human truth in a different way when you're, I think any great art can be, it doesn't have to be Shakespeare, but just for me, that was like, oh my God, I get it. I get some of these bigger concepts and just thinking that, oh, someone wrote this 400 years ago, and yet it's still just as true to the human condition now, and something that we can bring alive today and then can be connected 400 years from now. That light switch for me was so thrilling. And I think, we talk about like skill set wise, it was like, oh, and I can do this in a way that like, I think very similar thrill to me in musical theater, watching other people do it, watching Elizabeth in Jagged Little Pill, for instance, like the level of acting and singing she's doing simultaneously is so touching and moving to me. But I'm like, I don't have that high level singing ability. So I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do that in a way that I'm like, oh, I can bring Shakespearean poetry to life. And there's still an elevation in the way song is elevated and the truth of this dramatic text to life. And so yeah, that is my favorite thing individually to teach. I really love doing that. And I love sort of bringing students along in that way. And I think kind of similarly, now in this more sort of leadership role, which has now been many years of directing the team, I like, that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, I like kind of demystifying this process and helping students to figure out like how they can succeed in it, especially insofar as like, there can be stripping away of anxieties or preconceived notions or sort of ways that students are getting in the way of themselves. To me, is thrilling in a very similar way. Like when you watch that light go on, and they go, oh, I walk in the room and that's what it is. Like, which often happens. We're about to be unified. Often happens there where you're like, oh, we've been talking about this for 4 months. Maybe they are listening to the pod. Maybe they read some blogs. Maybe they're working with their coaches. But then they walk in a room and they go, I did it. I did the audition thing, which wasn't just perform my songs and monologues well, but like I showed up with my whole self. I had this full experience, right? And it is such a high, which, anyone who's done this kind of thing has experienced. So I think that to me is just as thrilling when I'm like, oh, cool. That was a little bit of advice that worked for you, and that you were able to do that and unlock something for yourself is really thrilling for me.
Yeah, no, it is such like demystifying. I remember listening to the podcast when I was auditioning and just like going through the process, or even afterwards too, of just being like, this is so interesting because it's not like a perfect formula that you can follow to get into a school. Like there is no way of doing that because it's like you never know who's going to be reading your audition or seeing your audition. Like any of that kind of thing where it's just like you really don't know. You can just show up as your full self. And I think I tried to do that as much as I could. I was like, I'm just going to go do my thing. Like that's kind of like the mindset that I had going into it. And just having like the podcast and the support of just like, okay, this isn't as scary as it needs to be. It's like these are just people who want to find someone who's fit for their program. And that's really it. It's like you really can't be, there's no way you can be a perfect cookie cutter formula for them. Yes. It's like no one is going to be the same in any one program, where it's like you really just have to take the coach's advice. So just do it with your full self, and it'll work out in the end. And like, what is? Oh, sorry.
Well, just throw in there too. Like, what's so thrilling for me about it, and it's one of the reasons I still like doing this, even almost 2 decades later. I cannot believe it. 2 decades later. Yep. But doing this for almost 20 years, like the idea of like, because the students are always 17, 18, the process of going through that is almost always kind of aligned with them stepping into their adulthood too. I mean, that's part of what the college process is in general for some people with this, writing essays, whatever. But you just have to do it in such a raw and vulnerable way for these theater auditions. That you have to sort of show up to this question of who am I in a way that's most people don't have to fully do at 17, 18. I mean, again, it depends on the field, but boy, we really ask you to go in and show up with that full self. It's just like so thrilling. Even when then I have my students who don't end up pursuing theater, whether maybe they do theater in college and then quickly go, you know what, I actually decide I want to be a lawyer, I don't want to do whatever. But they'll talk about like the auto da fe of this experience, I sort of trial by fire of this, like, oh my gosh, like going through this and being seen and being judged and putting myself out there is like, it is like this cool step into adulthood. I just, year after year after year, it's like we watch our students come in feeling kind of like kids and they exit feeling like adults in this really cool way. So that's also really thrilling. It's just like watching people grow as humans over a relatively short period of time. If we met you in May, that was less than a year that we were together before you're deciding where you go to school. So it's like to be able to see that progress over the course of the year is just always so thrilling too.
Yeah, and the progress is so fast. And then I think for me, after like getting in and doing the process, you're like, I did it. And then now I actually have to go do it.
And now begin. That's just the beginning of it all. Yeah, that's what's crazy part.
You're like, I did everything. And then I said for 2 months where I'm going to go to school. And then I actually have to go to school and do what I said I was going to do, which is so scary. But it's like, I think we got set up in a way, like through MTCA, just like set up to where, okay, yeah, we're ready for this. And I know I was scared, but then it works out in the end. Like I said, it's like, there's really just... it's just you gotta be yourself. It's really all I can say, and there's nothing else that you can do to like make it any easier, because that is so hard to just put your full self out there. And then just going through the process, like what is your advice to anyone who was like me, who was maybe starting late but has a lot of passion or a lot of love for this craft, but really has no idea what they're stepping into, or maybe is starting even later than I did?
I think my big advice would be like, especially for someone who's starting later in the process, that you are trying to prepare yourself as much as you're preparing the material. Because I think there are just so many boxes to check. It's easy to get kind of wrapped up in the like, I got to do these essays, I got to do the applications. There's so many of those like kind of not super important for the process parts of it, of just literally have to check off the boxes. Some schools essays more and less so, but in general, just all those, got to fill out your Social Security, get your, all of your transcripts and all these things that have to get done in order to actually do the college application process on its own. And then given how sort of complicated the pre-screens have become, I think it's easy to get wrapped up in like, what are the materials I need to prepare, which then sort of become their own kind of boxes. And we sort of miss the artistic part of it because we're going, okay, I need 2 songs, I need 2 monologues, I need a 1-minute dance, I need a wild card. I got to make sure all that stuff is perfect and shows me off all the different ways, right? And of course, you are preparing the material. So it's not to say like, don't worry about that. You don't have to do pre-screen. You do have to prepare the material. But like one of the things I think people realize as they're walking in those audition rooms is like, oh, they're walking in and choosing about me. They're walking in and accepting me as an artist and as a human being. And so like, if you spent all of your time only preparing your songs and monologues, or maybe I should say preparing your songs and monologues in a way that it's about the performances of the songs and monologues, then I would be like, that's not to me the best way to go through the preparation. It's like, I want to use those songs and monologues as vehicles to work on myself as an artist so that I can walk in the room introducing them to a flexible artist through these songs and monologues, but knowing they may give me adjustments, they may chat with me, and also knowing that like, they're not accepting the best 22 performances they see or whatever the number is of people they see. They're accepting 20 human beings, or in BoCo says 60 human beings or whatever it is. Right? They're accepting a class of people that they want to show up to their school, which doesn't necessarily mean like, that was a 9.5 out of 10 and that was a 9.3. We have to take the 9.5. Like that's just not how the process works, as you go through it. And so I think if you feel like you spent 6 months just working on performances and not working on yourself, to me, that would be a mistake. I would want you to keep thinking, how do I make this a sustainable cultivation of an artist as opposed to notes on the material and slightly improving the material again and again. I mean, that's something we always emphasize to our coaches, that it's like, it is about the sustainability of who is the artist that's showing up. It's not about just the songs and monologues.
Yeah. And I think also finding like songs that align with yourself too. Because I remember, because one of my song coach was Josh Daniel, and he is like one of the sweetest people in the world. And he was always like, we're auditioning you. This is like Ashley the musical or whatever. I think he did say those words of just like, this is going to be you auditioning for a school. It's not just the material. You're not preparing for a role or by any means. And so find things that really align with yourself and align with your own experiences. And I think when you do that, it's like, then you show yourself in the room and then you show through the material as well. It's like you show it in all aspects of your audition. and just have that ability to show your full and true self instead of just being like material that's been perfectly, practiced. And yes, you want to be consistent. Yes, you want to do a good job, but it's like, it's not all about that. It's mostly about just showing who you are through these songs, through these monologues. And then, after that, you could have a chat with them for like 10 minutes or however long they want to have you there, of just being like, that's totally fine. If maybe they want you because of that 10 minutes and not because of your 5 minutes of singing. And it's like, there is so many different ways that this process works, because the people behind the table are just also people. And they're just wanting to have the best thing for their school and the best thing for their program. And if you're a fit, you're a fit. If you're not, then that's totally okay. You'll be a fit somewhere else. And just accepting that, I think, was a good thing for anyone to really do. I'm just like, this is okay.
Yep. You're hired, Ashley. I agree. You're hired.
And how does it feel for you every single year when students kind of graduate from MTCA and then move on to go to the colleges, hopefully, of their dreams?
There's always a sadness. I mean, it is, I think it's what high school teachers experience too. Just like, because especially for me and now my capacity as a director, I often get to know people really well around this time of year. Maybe I met them, if Leo did their initial consult, I might have met them at a follow-up, or I may have seen them at a mock, or, I may have worked with them in a class or that kind of thing. But then after spending sometimes 4, 5, 6 days together at Unified, really bonding, really getting to know each other, and then, of course, then they're gone. You go, oh, no. And then you're off to go do it. I will say it is really cool for us now, having been around a long time, is like the students who come back to us, which now happens more and more, whether now they come back. We've had students come back and be coaches. We've had students come back and do shows with our coaches or with ourselves. And then some of them will come work for us. And we've had students who come, where they work in the admin office. My assistants have been two former MTCA students. So they definitely will find their way back into our lives, especially those who moved to New York, because of course we're based in New York. But it's always a bittersweet. It's always like such a joy and such a sadness, to be like, oh, goodbye. But so many of them, I do feel like, and this is true. I mean, I do think MTC, I think we're really good at this process, but the thing is true about this process in general too. It's not unique to us, that like so many people will find the fit that is right for them. Like, I can't say it's 100%. Like some people say, you guarantee to find your fit. I'm like, no, I there are times you go, oh, you had a little bit of bad luck. If you get that strep throat, it happened a week earlier, and you go, I just wasn't, there are times where you go, it's not 100%. But I do think in the vast majority of cases for our students, they end up where they belong, and they end up where they're really happy with. And at least they feel like, oh, I did this process with integrity. I ended up at a place that really wanted me, and I really want them. And it feels like you're sending them off into a cool collegiate experience. And what's fun for us too about graduating is like, we do get to leave them at a really happy place. This business is a really difficult business. And many people discover when they actually move to New York and they have to wait tables and they have to audition or whatever, they go, this is hard. But I think as hard as this business is, it's also really fun to train for. So most of them are going into college to get to go, I'm about to pursue my dream. And we get to leave them at a very happy place in the process, as opposed to, the 6 years, 7 years later, where some people might be like, this is hard. I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you already think college is hard. It's like, wait till you get out there and really start doing it. It's like college is kind of just like a practice session for what it's really like. And to just think about that, it's like, it's so fascinating just to think of what college can be or what it doesn't have to be for you. It's like, it's not all or nothing. It's like, it's a stepping stone to get to where you need to be. Maybe if that's in law school, like
totally.
there's no right way to do college or do this process at all.
Yeah. And what I'll say, we talked about in the pod a little before, but the thing I miss so much about college, and some other guests have been like, yes, I know that, or they've led with this, is like, it's so cool. You don't realize how unique it is to have somebody caring about you and staring at you for 4 straight years. Not literally staring at you necessarily, but that feeling of going, I am invested in your educational growth. It's to some extent true in high school, though not necessarily artistically, but then get to go to a conservatory. There's something so special about like, this whole program is designed to help you grow artistically. And you need to keep growing artistically out of school. But then all of a sudden you're like, oh God, I'm in charge. There's nobody who's helping you and going, you know what, you did this sophomore year. What if we do this junior year? Here's your next big goal. Like all of a sudden you graduate and you're like, I have to keep maintaining that. And it's like having a personal trainer. It's like nice to be like, you tell me what to lift. Okay, no problem. As opposed to like, all right, Charlie, go to the gym. It's time to lift chest. It's time to, I'm like, I don't want to do that. But you have someone who really cares about you and looks at you. And then of course you're going through it with classmates. There's just so much that's special about the college experience, which is not replicatable.
And I even remember you and Leo are very, like, you emphasize a lot, with following through with your degree and making sure that you are finishing your training before you go out into the real world. Because once you're out there and you're working, then it becomes your job and you don't get to just really learn. And I think to just put yourself fully into the training process of it all, like for me, I know I definitely want to finish my degree and I'm not going to try and no, like it won't be a goal to like leave school. Whatever happens. We have no idea, but it's like
definitely not like never, but in general, to go, what you're giving up if you leave, and it's so hard to go back, and it's hard to replicate the magic experience of those 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, because maybe you're not ready yet, or maybe you aren't ready for 8 shows a week yet. You haven't trained your body in that way, or you still need the help of people who have been on Broadway. My teacher is Ramon Owens, who went to BoCo and then was in Beetlejuice on Broadway. And he is a dancer, and he knows exactly how to keep yourself safe so you don't get hurt too. Because if you're just going into that and not exactly knowing what you're doing yet, it's like there could be a lot that is hard or a struggle to get back to maybe where you need to be. And so now talking,
I even add in like socially too, but just to say like I think some people, even if you're ready training wise and you go artistically, dancing, singing, acting, I'm ready to be in a Broadway show. It's like, if you leave sophomore year of school, and again, people do this and have very successful lives, but like, are you getting the sort of social experience of growing for 4 years with a cohort of people that often helps sort of form the human being that you are? And, that's some people that they don't need that. It's not everybody, but I think there's some people who go, oh God, I was so glad I got to have that weird junior year experience where I was whatever it is that year, I was trying on this specific identity, or I was doing this thing where I was like, I'm this person now. And then to be able to grow through that and go, oh, and what it is to then do my showcase and have that full experience of the 4 years. Often there's a lot of kind of social and human growth that happens in college too. That isn't just about the artistic stuff.
Yeah, no, yeah. Like you said, there is so much to do other than just doing your classes, and it's about all the little moments in between. And now talking about you more personally, since you and your amazing wife, Elizabeth Stanley, who's a Tony nominee, yay!
Grammy winner. We have a Grammy in the bathroom. It's no big deal. Yeah.
Hey, that's the best place to put it. Exactly right. Since you are both in this business and you have a child, like, what is it like for you finding that work-life balance between you two? Because I'm sure she's auditioning for everything, and and just being a working actor, and then you are too, and you're doing Shakespeare and doing all these different things, and you run MTCA and are doing coachings and being a teacher, and then you also have a kid, which is like it's a job in itself of just wanting to put all your attention into your child. Like, what has it been like for the two of you trying to figure out a good balance when even she was on Broadway too for another like time after the pandemic, and just because it is so much, like, what was maybe the best thing you heard or something that you figured out that works for the both of you?
Yep. It's such a good question. Talk about, this will be the one that I check back in 10 years to see how true or not true this answer is. Because, it's something we're constantly figuring out. Having a kid in this industry is not made for people to have kids. So if you're like, I want to go have 6 kids, like, no, you can do it. I'm not saying you can't, but like the industry is like, it's especially hard on mothers. I'll say, it's hard. It's really, it's not always consciously so, but it's something that, I hope the industry will continue to keep getting better and recognize more and more. If you want to have sustainable families in this industry, boy, it's tricky, in the way that like, because, if you have a job with W-2 where you're always working, they can have a maternity leave, and it just doesn't quite work that way because the jobs all come from different places. And, it's not that people want to sort of blacklist or whatever is the people, but they go, oh, they're off doing that, right? And they think, oh, I think they're having a kid, or I think they're, and sort of the way that specifically women are treating this. All right, that's a side tangent on that. But I'll say something that you and I are constantly figuring out. The last show I did was right before the pandemic, so I've not done a show since the pandemic. I don't know for sure what that would look like in our lives with me doing MTCA and as having a kid. and potentially Elizabeth working. Something we're figuring out. One of my New Year's goals was, I've started writing and directing, and so I'm trying to think, like, is there some more avenue that down that path, which might be a little bit more sustainable in our lives. The last sort of job I auditioned for and booked was in Florida, and I turned it down. It was like, it just doesn't make sense for me to leave.
Yeah.
This is where also, guys, everyone marry up. It's a great idea to marry up, but the kind of jobs I'm booking as a non-musical theater actor who's not a Tony and Grammy nominee often pay a tenth of what Swiss jobs are worth, and so it's a tricky balance of going. Where does that fit in? Where does your artistic life fit in? But of course, you don't want to fully ignore that. But then where does the family fit in? And something I think we're just constantly continuing to navigate and figure out. But it's something to think about. As you enter this industry of just having a family. I mean, I think it's true of many different jobs. There are going to be sacrifices and things that you have to, make if you want to have a kid. And we're so thrilled to have with a beautiful daughter, and and to support your partner and to support yourselves and support whatever. So check back in 10 years. But I think it's something that we will continue to navigate and try to, I think we try to both support each other's dreams in all the meanings of that word. I think is you try, it's something you try to own that dream as if it's your own, because it's theirs and mine is mine. But you try to say, how do I support yours and how do you support mine? And how do we make that work for us as a family?
Yeah, no, I think that's great what you said about not going to Florida for a job, and knowing kind of where your family is at right now. I think I talked to someone not that long ago, and he was like, yeah, I'm not going to go on a national tour because I want to stay in New York and I want to stay in my Brooklyn apartment. Just knowing what you want in your lifestyle, not being like, I'm going to take every job that comes my way, of understanding maybe what your limits are and what is right for you. And so, that sounds like you're just, it's an ever evolving thing too, of just knowing what you need and knowing what your family needs too. So it's like, it's another thing that there's no right way to do it, but hopefully a good way to do it.
Of course, a privilege of age and a privilege that I have this wonderful job that I don't need to take X job for the money. But it's like the privilege of age is that, and then sort of often the privilege of youth is you go, I don't have the attachment, and so I can go take that non-union tour that doesn't pay me much, but artistically it's going to let me scratch that itch and learn and grow and do all the things. So, I think often people feel the grass is greener. God, I can't wait to get to that point. And then, old people look back nostalgically and go, oh, it was so nice when I could just take those jobs and live in cast housing and figure all that stuff out. And,
yeah. No, it's like the life of an actor is just so interesting.
And I think as you're doing very smartly, of course we both are podcasters, but also just finding creative pursuits. I mean, for me, running the blog, running the podcast becomes a nice creative pursuit for myself as well, especially during the pandemic, where that's what I started during the pandemic going, I need to do something creative. I need something creative in my life that is not just administrative. And it was that for me, and it's been a real joy for me to get to do.
Mm-hmm. And also, this is a random question, but does Elizabeth Stanley use a Stanley?
That's so funny. I think the answer is no. I think the answer to that is no. I think we have what are the one? Yeti, I think is what we have.
I was just thinking about that yesterday. I think when I was finalizing my questions, I was like, wait, does she
use a Stanley?
Yeah, I was like, does Stanley use a Stanley? That's the biggest question.
If
my
they're
mom
willing
will
to,
like that question.
If we're willing to sponsor the podcast, then yes, Elizabeth Stanley will do a Stanley. Just for whatever the podcast sponsorship rate is, we'll make it happen.
And to kind of wrap it up, since so much of your life is in and around theater, and about just all of the different aspects of theater and this business, what is a passion that you have that has nothing to do with theater? Because for me, that is food, and I know that about myself. Yes.
Ashley, I don't say food. I have such a complicated relationship with food. Of course, who doesn't? Well, not me. I guess not you. No, listeners to my podcast will, of course, know I'm a huge NBA basketball fan. That's where I sort of have put my sports fandom, though I also am an intramural softball champion. We are the current Broadway Show League champions.
Yes.
And so that's a true passion of mine. It's something we talked about with John Cariani of what are your passions that aren't, that you really are truly deeply passionate about? So those are two for me. And the other one I would say is, and this will shock nobody who listens to the podcast, but might shock you, is Survivor, the TV show. I discovered during the pandemic, and I became a huge Survivor fan. I always had loved like poker growing up, and I played poker for many years, and I did a little bit of like trying to support myself playing poker and succeeding at times. And so like Survivor is basically human poker. It's just like this weird, it's like if you love acting, it's like there's acting elements to it because of course you have to read people and people are lying to each other, but then it's also this game theory, which I really love game theory. So that's a passion.
No, it's a fascinating show. There's actually someone from Bakersfield who was on Survivor.
Who?
Lauren Alexandra, I think is her name, or Lauren something. I don't remember. It was a couple years ago, but her sister went to school with my brother, and like I remember that was the one season of Survivor my family watched because she was on it.
Heck yeah, go Lauren.
Yeah. No, but I think it's good to emphasize things that don't have anything to do with theater. Just like you're a person first, and you have to be a person first before you can do any of the other things, because being a person fulfills and will pour into your art and everything around that. So I was just interested to hear all the kind of things that you like to do. Totally. Being, ex jock in the past. I mean, I played volleyball in freshman year. I was like, I used to do sports.
Actually, you remind me, you are how tall? You're a tall person.
I am 5'8".
5'8", yeah.
So like tall tall for being Asian, but not tall in my family. My family is a very tall family.
Your mom's even taller, right?
Like slightly taller than me, I think. But people keep telling me I'm taller than her. I'm like, I don't know. But my uncle's like 6'4".
Long and willowy. So you bring I would picture very good at volleyball. That seems helpful.
But I have not played in years. But it's like, maybe, who knows? Maybe someday. There's time.
In that dream, when you own a cat and you're living in New York, you could be volleyballing it up.
You go volleyball instead of, that'll be in place of dance classes on some day. Just go do volleyball.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. How do you wrap up your episodes? I forgot.
A quick haiku. Do you guys do haikus at the end? No, I'm kidding. Normally, we sort of stop talking at some point.
I was like, wait a minute.
I often ask people for advice, though. I kind of already did that for you of like, do you advice for people in the process? But is there anything that you didn't get to say in terms of like, hey, what your advice for people out there would be?
I guess my advice for anyone, whether they be in college or just as a person, is just like, if you're gonna go into theater, just make sure you're a person first and trying to like just live your life like that instead of I'm only an actor. Like, I think I used to just talk about Broadway stuff, and now I'm like, okay, maybe I have to transition away from that and have people to talk about not Broadway too, or just have different avenues of things that I like to do, because there is so much you can do with your life. There's 24 hours in a day. Half of it maybe you're sleeping, but half of it you have so much you can do. I've started like just a couple days ago, I got this new little camera here.
Yes.
And I started a vlog series where I'm just going to make a video a day. And it's not going to be all about Broadway. Maybe I'll talk about BFA programs and what I'm doing in college or podcasting or whatever. But part of it's just going to be going to the dentist, going to the doctor's office. Like, there's so many things that I do in my life that have nothing to do with being an actor and have nothing to do with being in college. Like, in the summertime, I'm actually thinking of doing a study abroad program to start learning Chinese, because I don't know Mandarin or Chinese, and that's something I'd really like to have in my life that has nothing to do with acting. Like, maybe it could bleed into acting, but it really has more to do with who I am as a person and discovering more of who I am, because I don't know who I am yet, because I'm so young. There's so much to learn. But I think that if you're just approaching life as like enjoying your life and taking care of yourself and making sure that you're just being fulfilled, like, happiness will come through that. And my grandparents are always telling me that. My parents are always telling me that. Like, just make sure you enjoy your life instead of just being, focused on work and focused on what that has to do, because that can't be everything.
It's such good advice. And when you said it might bleed into your acting, I'm like, it will bleed into your acting. Like, that's over the course of a 40-year career or whatever, like the things that you go, how could that possibly affect my acting? They do. Whether it's because you're in a play where it ends up being important, it's something you're going to reference, something that's going to inspire you, but just time and time again, the stuff that you love about your life that has nothing to do with theater does impact and influence your professional life. It always does.
Yeah, and then it's like also travel the world. Like, do things. Like, you don't have to go just do a vacation, just travel, like just go to different places, learn about different cultures. It's like there is so much out there. There's so much theater in Asia, like that is so beautiful. That is nothing like the kind of shows that we see on Broadway. Some of them are completely different art forms, and it's like there's a lot to learn about different places. And I think if we learn about all different people and all different cultures, that can only expand your horizons and give you more empathy for different kinds of people. And being in America, there is every kind of person. And I think what our world really needs is a lot of empathy right now. And so if everyone can just kind of take that space to just want to learn about different people and hear different stories, like Here Lies Love or K-pop or, A Strange Loop or Ain't No Mo, like any of those stories where you may not relate to the characters, and that is okay. Of just knowing that being a person first and understanding other people as people is the most important.
What the world needs now is empathy. And that has never been more true. Ashley, that's so true. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, shall we wrap there? Should we? Ashley, I thank you for coming on my podcast.
Yes, thank you for being on my podcast.
It's a weird thing when you're both hosting, but this was so fun to get to do. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yes, of course. And thank you. And I can't wait for everyone to hear it and just hear about our different experiences and, what our hopes and dreams are for the future in 10 years. You've been listening to Broadway Corner with Ashley Ha. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time.